Good evening, everyone, and welcome. On behalf of the Federal Bar Association, thank you for attending tonight's program, Views from the Bench, San Jose staff. My name is Chris Decker. I'm the current president of the Northern District of California chapter of the FBA. As many of you know, the FBA is a premier volunteer professional organization boasting some 17,000 members and almost 100 chapters across the country. The FBA has many aims, but I like to think of it as a conduit between the bar and the bench. It fosters networking, education, professional development, and advocacy on behalf of those who consume legal services. We are a member-driven organization. And so I would invite each of you to register to become a member if you're not already. You'll see a neat QR code outside. You can sign up and get all the benefits of being an FBA member. Please encourage your colleagues and professional networks to do the same. You won't regret it because you'll get to take part in programs like tonight. Now, tonight we come together for something that we can never get too much of. A candid conversation about how the federal courts work in the real world. We get to learn how we as practitioners can better serve our clients, the courts, and the judicial system as a whole. I'm sure you would all agree with me that the San Jose bench plays a vital role in the Northern District of California. If you just look at the court's dockets, they reflect all of the issues that are shaping federal law this day. Complex civil cases, criminal law, intellectual property, artificial intelligence. The judges who sit on this bench not only bring expertise, a deep expertise, but they also offer a front row perspective on what effective lawyering looks like. This evening, we have the benefit of hearing directly from members of our San Jose bench about what they are seeing on a day-to-day basis, what they value most from an advocate, and how lawyers can navigate the challenges of the day with clarity, purpose, professionalism, and most importantly, with integrity. I am grateful to our panelists for their time, candor, and their continued commitment to the rule of law. I'm especially grateful to our San Jose vice presidents, Alan Wang and Ravi Ranganath, for their time creating tonight's program, along with our chapter's executive administrator, Alex Murray. And I thank each one of you for participating in the discussion tonight and beyond. As you know, we will be gathering after tonight's roundtable downstairs in the attorney's lounge, so please join us for a reception. And please do remember to return your name badge down in the attorney's lounge once we're done with it. We would appreciate that. And with that, I'm very pleased to turn tonight's program over to Ravi and Alan. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. You don't want to hear me talk. We're here to hear the judges talk. So I won't do a long introduction, but just to add on to what Chris said, Alan and I are vice presidents of the San Jose division of the Federal Bar Association. We both have worked together for many years and we're patent litigators at Fenwick and West, and have spent quite a bit of time in the courthouse here in San Jose. So we're really excited to host this event. So let me introduce our great panel of judges. We have Judge Susan Van Keulen, Judge Nat Pleasans, Judge Edward Davila, and Judge Beth Freeman. And I won't bore you with their very long list of accomplishments, but I'm sure you're all very familiar with them. I'll just say, just to maybe age you a little bit. Judge Van Kulen, I argued my first motion in front of you many, many years ago. So I'm really happy to have you guys here.
Say that.
So I'll pass it over to Alan to get us started.
Yeah, so I'm going to get started on a topic that everybody loves to hate, which is discovery disputes. What I would love for our distinguished panel to share for us today is, what do you wish lawyers had done before they bring the discovery dispute to your courtroom? And do you have any advice on how to avoid making the meet and confer process counterproductive? Good start.
Well, I'm sitting here. There's not much I can say because I do refer my discovery disputes to our magistrate judges. I would say the thing I most wish they would do before they come to me is resolve the discovery. That's top of list.
Agreed.
And our experts here.
Right, and we try to do that when we have our conferences, our first.
Yes.
And we try to ask, okay, what's going to percolate? What are we going to have our magistrate judges look at? And you really need it to go to that, to Judge Bennet's point. Sometimes they can't get resolution. That's what happens to justice.
Thankfully, our law clerks are here. They truthfully answer the question, but they do not have the microphone either. So thank you to them and for all of you for being here. Discovery is really part of case management, and we handle our own cases and referral, civil discovery for our judge colleagues. And we all as judges have a similar meet and confer requirement and joint letter brief process, some small wrinkles in that, but the intent of all that is to encourage parties to work out their disagreements without need for judicial assistance, but sometimes judicial help is required. And I guess if I were to try to summarize it, we're really looking for solutions to move the case forward. So people frequently have problems. They tell us all the problems, disagreements, objections. But what we're really trying to focus on is, okay, how can we solve that problem, move the case forward in a fair and timely way to get to the merits of it? Because we want to get to the merits, and discovery oftentimes is just something to fight about along the way. And it's supposed to be a search for truth, but it becomes something to fight about. And we want to get past the fight and move the case along. So if the parties can agree themselves, great. And if they can't, then we want you to help us to help you to find a way forward so we can advance things without building. That's mine.
I think the biggest thing that the parties can do is meet and confer is not a check the box. Oh yeah, the standing order says meet and confer. Okay. Somebody on the team, anybody on the team, go meet and confer. Check. That's not the point. And as I often put in my orders, go back and do it again. And the lawyers have to have authority to negotiate and compromise. That's the only way you're going to work towards a solution. And that's the point of meeting and conferring, so that you're not coming to us with every disagreement. So I feel very strongly that the meet and confer team or person needs to have that authority to make a deal, and has a thorough enough vision of the case that they know where they can compromise and can present that and work through it. And if that doesn't resolve the dispute and it comes to me, I want the lawyers who did the meet and confer are the ones who are coming. And again, as I often say in my orders, you come and you have to be prepared to stay all day. I'm not going to be on the bench all day, but you may be here working all day. And I'll hear the dispute and I'll give you some guidelines. And if necessary, I'll send you downstairs to the attorney lounge. It won't have the food in it that it has tonight. And tell you to come back in an hour. Work it out and come back in an hour or 2 hours. So you can do it on your own, or you can do it in front of me, but it's got to be people who are prepared, have authority to negotiate and compromise, and show up and, roll up your sleeves. We'll get it done. We'll get it done, but it's going to be work.
So not on the list of questions we gave you guys, but I'm going to ask you something that is top of mind based on some cases I'm working on now, not in front of any of you. What do you do how do you suggest lawyers handle when they're dealing with parties who are being not civil, not well behaved, unprofessional in the context of discovery. I've heard from judges before that we don't want to see all your discovery correspondence and your emails. But how should we handle it when we think the other side is genuinely being unprofessional or unreasonable and we want to convey that?
Well, I think this is where the worst conduct comes out. And I think that lawyers believe no one's looking, so they can use the nastiness to their advantage. It's not productive, and we try to shut it down when we get here. But I'll say that over the years, lawyers have talked to me about the fact that actually judges should use sanctions more frequently than we do, because the conduct that they are experiencing is so bad that unless the other lawyer, the bad actor, is held accountable, that it's just not going to stop. Because a trail of emails, they know the judge is going to say, don't bother me with those nasty emails. But I do think that there is an increasing awareness of the role of sanctions to moderate lawyers' behavior.
Judge Freeman and I were on a panel in Arizona last week, and this was one of the topics that came up. And I think both of us indicated that we don't care, we don't like the sanctions. It's something that we like to do. Contempt is off the board because there's probably 3 judges in the United States that can do that correctly. It's a difficult process. But sanctions are a different topic, and regrettably, it seems there are times when the level of civility that's diminished such that, as Judge Freeman said, sanctions are probably one of the only things we can do. Now, let me say in regards to the discovery practice, we, here in San Jose, magistrate judges are already automatically assigned to a case. They receive the discovery. My sense of it is, anecdotally and otherwise, lawyers, and I'll just use this word, misbehave in front of our poor magistrate judges more than they do when they come to see us. And here's something that the big reveal. You probably didn't know this, but judges do talk. And so we will learn of that behavior. And it comes with, if you behave that way in a magistrate court or not talking about a discovery issue, there is no code of silence there. We will know about that. And that's something that I'm sure, Judge Cousins and Dan Cooley can talk about that does filter back. Does that happen, Judge?
No, I disagree. I think a 2 a.m. email where you make fun of your opponent, that's the way to go. And if that fails, post it on Truth Social or Twitter, because that's also a very good way to make peace. No, we do get exposed to those emails eventually, and it's wrestling with pigs every time. It's just bad news to be receiving or sending the nasty grams, but we do see them, and that's just kind of productive. But I do have a technique that some other attorneys taught me long ago, which is to try to get positive communication at the beginning of the case with your adversary. Actually speak with them, not send them an email or a mean letter, but actually speak with them to encourage them that when you have a dispute later in the case, that they're going to do the favor of calling you back to talk about it and see if you can work it out. And that works so much better than waiting for a problem and then being nasty in response. So having positive communication, especially with your adversary, that's the most important person to have a good communication with. Is who you're disagreeing with in the case, is to have good communication, so that if things become adverse, as they might, you'll have an opportunity to fix the problem before your angry exchange of emails gets presented to the court, and then everybody ends up being embarrassed and nothing productive is occurring. So I guess that's my encouragement, is just to try to foster direct and open communication, even before you have a problem. Those cases, we just have 20% of the cases have 80% of the problems. And if you can avoid being in that category, your life will be better than so will ours.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I think I agree. There are certainly situations where the sanctions are warranted, and that's the only way you're going to get someone's attention. as most of you know, the magistrate judges in this court, we have a robust consent calendar also. And I think that that actually mitigates against bad behavior, even on the referral cases, because any lawyer in my courtroom knows, I could be their presiding judge, if not on this case, their next case. So I actually haven't seen an uptick, or I don't see it any worse than it's ever been. And I think our consent calendar.
Well, why don't we move on to a topic of brief writing, which is particular interest to me because that tends to be all I do in my work is writing a lot of briefs. So I definitely want to hear from you all. Why don't we start with I think what could be an educational question for some, which is when you are confronted with a motion, how do you go about reading the briefs? What do you look at first? What's your process? Obviously in conjunction with your law clerk.
I start with I start with the table of contents, and I often do start with the reply. I want to know at the end of the day, what's really what are the key issues, but then I go through it, and good brief writing gets to the point. You say it up front and you say it again, and you give me the authority for it, and then you're done. Newsflash, you don't have to use all the pages aloud. And I have most motions in front of me. If it's a 25-page motion, I'm at page 15 and everything's been said that needs to be said. And then it starts repeating. Not all, but most. And in the discovery disputes, I like them double spaced. I like it on pleading paper. So I give people 10 pages. I get to page 6 and I'm like, okay, I got it. So, get to the point. You don't lose any points for not using all your pages. Those are mine.
I'll keep going in reverse order.
Yeah, sure.
Agreeing with all that, I really am looking for procedural context to whatever motion it is of when we need to decide this, how does this connect with other things in the case? Do we need to address this today, or could it be tomorrow or next year? Because we get a whole range of motions at any one moment in time. And most people think that whatever they're submitting is an emergency, it needs to be decided right away. But looking beyond just the face of the motion, reviewing the docket to figure out, okay, are there a sequence of things? What order do we need to address these things? And how much of an emergency do we as a team need to make to this? That's the first thing I'm assessing, not all the, I'm not trying to grapple with all the arguments in the entire thing, but first to figure out when are we going to decide this? What is our output going to look like? Is this likely to be resolved at a hearing, or are we going to write a long or short order? So that kind of triage of managing is really the most important thing to me. So as a practitioner, giving me guidance about that is very helpful. On the first page, you say something about the urgency and the reality of when this needs to be decided. That's very helpful for me to give it the appropriate and timely response.
Well, I do, like Judge Van Keulen, I'll look at the table of contents. And it is not infrequent when I'll look at the reply first. Depends on the kind of case too. And case, and I try whatever that topic is. Sometimes that drives where I want to, in my familiarity with the case, that drives where I want to start. And then come back again. Referencing the panel that Judge Freeman and I were on, there was a similar question, and the question was something about, okay, Judge, late at night, you're done with work and you're home. I know you're hardworking, and you pick up the work that you brought home. Which one of those briefs, which one brief would you pick up? And what is it about those briefs that you're going to read at night is the one that you'll pick up to read at? I didn't say this then, things we wish we'd said, but to Judge Van Keulen's point, recognize that nature abhors a vacuum. But in writing, the one I'm going to pick up is the one that's 22 pages. The one that's 21 pages, because that tells me that this person is a good writer. They're concise. They're not afraid to put in what they need, and they're not afraid to concede 5 pages, 4 pages, 3 pages, because they can put it all right there. It's going to, at least to me, it's going to attract my attention that, okay, not just because I'm going to get the bid at 1 a.m. instead of 3 a.m. or whatever it might be, but this is somebody who has confidence in their case. And I expect it's going to be well written, nice, not waste words, and that's what's going to attract my attention. The brevity is terrific.
So when I look at a brief or a set of briefs, although I start with the opening brief to get the survey of what the issues are, I'm really focusing on the opposition and the reply. So whether it's motion to dismiss or summary judgment, the burden is on the moving party. And so when I read the opposition, I'm looking to see, does the opposing party say enough to defeat the burden of proof that the movement has? So, for example, in a motion to dismiss, sometimes I'll read the complaint just top to bottom. That's pretty rare because there's a lot of puff in a complaint, and I don't really know what I'm looking for. I read the paragraphs that the plaintiff who wrote the complaint sends me to establish that they have alleged sufficient facts to support their claim. And then I look at the reply, and that's where the moving party is really grappling with the issues and coming to terms with it. And those briefs, they're shorter and they're usually much better. It also tells me what the key cases are. Lawyers have a penchant for string citing cases on standard propositions of law. That's fine. You have to lay all that out. I'm not going to read all of those. I want to know what cases are really going to tell the story of what the outcome is going to be in the case. And so it's going to be the cases the opposing party cites and what are revisited in that reply brief. And that's how I'm going to do it. Then I've got a good sense in the complaint about where the plaintiff thinks the most important issues are. The same goes for summary judgment, because in a lot of cases, the defendant's saying there's an absence of evidence. And so the plaintiff can't prove their case. Sometimes they're trying to affirmatively prove an affirmative defense. But I want to look at the plaintiff's evidence. And of course, if you cite something and you cite it wrong, then we're done. But assuming that the evidence has been properly cited, if you have some evidence that a jury could believe on that issue, you win, and I'm done. And I don't actually have to look at everything else on that issue. And it is, we have a standard of review that we have to follow. So it's hard to win summary judgment. I think in our district, many parties win summary judgment, but it's a high standard. And so that's how I work with papers.
I have a follow-on question about the structure of briefs. So a lot of briefs, depending on what they are, have some section that is essentially a statement of facts. And a lot of us have either heard, have been told, have been taught, or believe that you should be able to convince the reader based on how you arrange your facts and how you present them. But there's a bit of a gray area between kind of being overly zealous in presenting the facts so that it takes them into kind of a more advocacy territory than simply a statement of the facts. But we do want to impart some of that essence. So if you have any guidance on where to draw that line and what is excessive and what is helpful.
This way.
Okay, all right, we can do that. All right. Well, if you're a defendant and you're writing a motion to dismiss, you have to recite the facts as alleged in the complaint. And that's hard to do. Lawyers find it hard to control themselves in arguing their own side of the case. So you're wasting space by doing that. You might think you're educating us about what your case will ultimately be, but you're not. You're annoying us because we have to tune that out. We have to look at the complaint. That's one of the reasons I don't really pay much attention to the details in the opening brief, because the plaintiff can then tell me what's been alleged. And plaintiffs have a penchant for arguing that they've alleged things that they wish they had alleged and that they promise they will allege in the next go round. And so we're sorting all of those things out. So few lawyers give us an honest statement of facts. They argue their own case. They shade the facts. They put in things that they wish was in the complaint, but it isn't really. They make us go fish for it. Of course, if you're the plaintiff and you forget to put a paragraph number by the statement you're making, it's a dead giveaway that it's not there. But then I had to go search for it, and I don't like that. So that's important. argue the facts. And if you're trying to defeat this motion on a motion to dismiss, concede it's not there, but explain why you would be able to allege sufficient facts to support that claim, which is all you need to say to be given leave to amend. But don't try to pretend like it's there and then have me say to you an oral argument. And what paragraph would that be? To which most lawyers say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't bring the complaint, so I don't know. We'll get to that later. I wish that only happened once.
That doesn't work well.
It doesn't work very well. No, it does.
Facts are facts.
Facts are
Facts are facts. And I was talking to one of my law clerks just before I came down. Mentioned something about a question like this. What do you what disturbs you? And she said, when I said, yeah, the phrase, when the truth finally was revealed. I said, right, that's literature. That's not really right. So come on, we don't need that. That's that type of hyperbole and those types of things. They're not helpful to us. Really, the facts are the facts, and you can't change the facts. You can discuss the facts, and then you can intertwine the law and how that supports your position. The facts are going to use that. Save your precious lines for your argument, and have cases that are right on point. So, as Judge Freeman says, you're directing us. Here's the case. And we know you're going to read it, Judge, because we know you read that thing. Read that case, and I don't have to say.
Yeah, copy and paste seems to be alive and well. I mean, the getting the fifth brief in the case where they're repeating all the facts that we already had before, that really is a waste of time and space. So I think the best edit would be to just shorten up the facts. If we already know and you already know, then there's no reason to say it again, and especially no reason to make up facts. That would be the worst scenario. But just making them short would probably generally be helpful.
I think a good rule, if the question is, can we add a little flair, or how much flair can we put in our statement of facts? The more you write, the better you get. And it's just stating the facts, but state them in a way that you think makes it interesting or easier to read. That's great. The exercise I always have my clerks go through before they give me a draft order is take out all the adverbs. Take out the adverbs. You don't need them. If you're presenting the facts in a good and strong way, you don't need the adverbs. So that is always my suggestion.
Well, you anticipated my next question, Judge McMillan, which is, when I review briefs or certain words, I will remove from a brief every time. Pursuant to is one. Fatally is another. So what are the words that just get on your nerves that we should not include in briefs? Or phrases?
Adverbs. I'm done. Go.
I don't have a bad word list. The judge I clerk for, as my clerks know, banned the word however. So I know people have particular sensitivities that they don't like. But I'll just put in the category, if you find yourself attacking opposing counsel, by name or by ethnicity, or saying something about them personally, like that, I think it's most common for self-represented litigants who maybe don't know better, but sometimes attorneys engage in that. That's the credibility of whatever is going to fall those words is probably not going to be very high. So that would be a good edit.
As I'm sure the court is aware.
Right up there with all
due respect.
That's in the same boxcar with those. Yeah.
Yeah, I really don't like, and it would be reversible error for you too.
And
You
then
don't want that heads up?
Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah, I'm not talking about the version.
Okay, why don't we move on to another topic, which is oral argument. What is the best way for someone who just come up to the podium to really establish themselves as, okay, you should listen to me and you should believe me? Like, what can they do in the first minute or two when they start that you find encouraging, that you wish that they did?
what's been impressive to me is when someone walks to the lectern and says, Judge, I want to cover 2 points and 3 points. But first, I'm happy to answer any questions the board has. But I just want to cover 2 or 3 points. And ask the court to, court has any questions, let's start there, because it's actually, it is my argument, but it's your court. Sometimes lawyers will come in and they'll say, thank you, Judge, I want to talk about 5, 6, 7, 9, 10. And the judge might say, the bubble over my head says, that's great. I'm interested in 2 and 3. And that's all. That's all I want to know. So asking is, the judge, do you want me to focus on something? I just have 2 points ahead. That's okay. That's going to be efficient. They know what's preparation, of course. You only know that by preparing your case, because the judge might ask for point 8, and you've only done 1 through 4, whatever it might be. You've got to be able to think on your feet.
Well, the question presumes that you get to start talking before the judge does. So in my courtroom, that actually doesn't happen. And so what you really have to be ready to do is to listen and to respond to what the judge is saying. Remember, you got to fill up 25 pages with what you wanted to tell us. And when you come to the argument, it's our turn. Now it's our turn to question you about the things that you wrote. It doesn't start with your argument. It ends with our questions. And so if a lawyer becomes flustered by me starting, they stand up and say their name and I've got questions, then they're not prepared. And good lawyers, and we see many good lawyers, are listening to that. They're taking notes. They've been listening. They immediately address those things. And then they might come around and say, I have 2 more issues, as Judge Davila says. Or they might have heard me say, you're winning on that issue. And they say, I don't want to jinx this. I'll sit down.
I will sometimes also, I will start saying, all right, I've read your briefs. Sir, ma'am, what is it you would like me to know in support of your motion? And there is the big eyes, the stuff. Well, okay. And then what are my 3 big points? What's my 1 big point? And okay. And then the questions start coming out. And yeah, that's how I do.
I think listening is the pro skill, because if you were there and you heard the judge's questions from the other side, maybe you can address those very same questions in your presentation, or you heard your adversary make some new point and you can turn to that, and you're demonstrating good communication with the court, that you're paying attention and you're addressing new things rather than just repeating the things that you already have in your brief, which will probably not change the court's analysis in any way. So making it an interactive process is going to be more impactful for you as an advocate.
Yeah, I'll just repeat the same, which is answer the judge's questions. I start almost all oral arguments with here's my view of the case. Here's what I see, even if I haven't decided anything yet. Here's kind of the landscape, and here are the questions I want you to address. And I do, with some frequency, I'll issue a pre-hearing order that'll identify issues for the parties, especially in more complex cases, because I want you to be ready to address those. And I find it very helpful, because then if I put it on a piece of paper a few days ahead of time, the lawyers actually are prepared to discuss the topics I want to discuss. So it's all just in the same vein of listening and responding to what the judge's line of inquiry is. Very
it is so important that you have at your fingertips the key documents that are at issue. If there's a contract, have it there. If it's a motion to dismiss, have the complaint there. Read it before you come into court, because I know what I want to ask you, and I have it right there. I've tabbed it. I open up to the complaint and I say, well, where in your complaint did you allege this? And as I said, lawyers say, well, I don't have the complaint with me. They fumble through it. They don't know where it is. I had a case where I asked the attorney, I said, well, what are the trade secrets? Well, they're in the statement of work. And I said, well, I've got it right here. Show me. Oh, I didn't bring it. Okay, it was such a fail. And that was unnecessary. So I know we'll get to this later. I always say, this is my one pet peeve. Don't ever be in a situation where your judge knows your case better than you do. So That's my guiding light on that. I hope it becomes yours.
So Judge Freeman, if I may, you ask a question and the litigant at the lectern says, Judge, that's a good question. I'll get back to it in just a moment.
That's a good answer, that they want to sit down and take a look for it. Yes.
I don't want to hijack our discussion down into the road of AI, but you know, a very popular use and tool is you feed up a bunch of briefs and say, so what questions will the court be asking? Or what questions should I be prepared to answer? I don't know how those programs play out in terms of what AI is doing as opposed to what I'm doing over the briefs and writing out my questions. But if you use those kinds of tools, fine. But again, it doesn't replace listening to the judge and being on point to respond to what they're asking. Very important.
I have heard of people who use AI tools, especially at the appellate level, when they have access to transcripts of arguments and they can come up with questions based on the. So I think that is happening.
I'm sure.
Yes. So I know many judges have standing orders encouraging junior lawyers to participate in oral argument. How important is that to you? And then a second question, revealing a lot about myself today, but I once had a judge tell me, you sit down, the other lawyer who's handing you notes, you stand up. How do you feel about, this was many years ago. No. How do you feel about, how should you help a lawyer who is maybe struggling a little bit at the podium? What are your suggestions?
I think I hate to refer to it as a silver lining of the COVID pandemic, but of the court's move to Zoom is I noticed a lot more junior lawyers arguing in that forum. And I think it was because, you know, the partner could be there on the screen with them and they could wave their hands or something if they felt like they needed to. I also think because it didn't involve as much travel and time and expense, it's a more efficient way to run a hearing, that it just made clients and client managers more comfortable with letting more junior people argue. And I think it is great. And I encourage it. And if they're getting you have to be prepared, you know, if you're going to stand up and argue, you don't get a pass. You have to do all the things we've been talking about. And if someone hands a junior lawyer a note, that's okay. And if I think they need a minute, I'll give them a minute. I mean, judges were very gracious with me when I learned. So, you know, I think it's fine, but I do want my questions answered.
Yeah, the pet peeve, the creeping up to the podium, passing out while someone's in the middle of talking is very distracting for the speaker and for the court. So that's not a very effective thing. I don't have a requirement as to the experience level of the people arguing in front of me. And the reason I encourage younger attorneys, newer attorneys to argue is that I don't know the full relationship between client and counsel to tell them how to run their business and what's at stake for their argument. So I have not taken a position of telling people who they should have as their attorney. I leave it to them to make that decision. And one of the reasons to have an argument is to give opportunity in the courtroom for less experienced attorneys to learn by doing and learn by being in the courtroom. That's true in the civil and criminal docket. So that's
we have those of us who have understanding orders, and most of us do, encouraging newer attorneys to argue motions. And if the parties want to have a newer attorney argue, let us know. We'll calendar it for him. We'll typically do that. Part of that practice, I think, is, and when we come to groups like yours and others, is one of the reasons for this is it gives the lawyers, the law firm, some cover. It gives you cover to tell your client who says, I want a partner to argue this motion. I must have a partner argue this motion. And my sense is it gives cover to that lawyer to say, well, that's fine. We can certainly get a partner to argue. This judge this judge for this motion probably wants to hear a newer lawyer argue that motion. And that might, if you're doing whatever kind of analytics you do, baseball analytics, that might move the needle a little bit in our favor. And that gives, I hope, gives some cover for a partner to say, okay, let's give it a shot. Let's give it some experience. Just one, don't tell war stories, I know, but one, when I was, I don't know, first 5 years here, a partner was arguing. I asked a question. The partner didn't pause. Nobody dared give him notes. And there was this pause, and then I turned and I said, well, why don't we ask Miss Smith sitting behind you? We all know she wrote it. And there was the same chuckle, and he looked and he said, well, okay. And he turned around and she got up and she argued and did a fantastic job. And I thought to myself, oh, well done. Yeah, that was good. Then I thought later, I probably put her the ride back to San Francisco. That car was probably uncomfortable for her. And I, didn't think that through. I don't know what, happened on that. I thought I was trying to give her a break. I probably didn't. I probably put her in a very uncomfortable position. So we have to be careful to recognize that.
Yeah, we certainly do. So I don't have standing orders that encourage or in any way. I certainly love seeing young lawyers, but I agree that it's really between your clients and your firm as to who is going to stand up for the client in court. The one thing that makes a difference for me, tell me that it's your first argument or one of your first arguments, because people don't necessarily look young when they're newer lawyers, and I'm not presuming inexperience. I'm presuming a person fully capable of arguing the motion is standing before me. And so either a partner comes with you and introduces you to make the argument and indicates that this is your first or one of your first arguments, or the newer lawyer should do that, because then I all of a sudden understand that the pause or the nervousness or whatever it is part of the training as opposed to being unprepared. And that can be very, very helpful. And where I might be kind of tough on a more senior lawyer, I would really pull back on someone who's learning the ropes.
And this has happened in front of me when someone comes and they will tell me, Judge, this is my first appearance. Not necessarily before they start, but afterwards. Mm-hmm. And I'll thank them for allowing me the privilege of being their first federal appearance. And then I'll get a transcript and send it. Oh. So let me know.
So love that. My first argument was before Judge Chen of Cisco, and he started by saying, "Counsel, I'm ruling against you, but you have the floor." A lot of time. It's fine. I wanted to again shift topics, just in the interest of making sure we're keeping the pace, to trial. And so the first thing that happens in trial after we have a jury is, of course, opening statements. Do you have any thoughts on what makes an effective opening statement versus an ineffective one? When is there too much detail, too much kind of theatrics?
Start.
Sure.
So the opening statement is critical to the case. The jury is probably listening in your first 30 minutes on your feet. What happens later, hard to say. I think the most important thing in your opening statement is to tell the story of your case and to tell the story of why your client should win. If you start out on the really technical deep dive of the intricacies of the evidence or the law, the jury's going to glaze over. They're looking for a good guy and a bad guy in every case. It doesn't matter what the topic is. It could be patent infringement. It could be a criminal case. It could be a contract dispute. It doesn't really matter. Why is your client the good guy in this case? And why does it make sense that your client's position should prevail? Because at the end of the day, if the jury is left wondering, well, I looked at those people and they don't look like the kind of people who would do that, then the plaintiff hasn't proved their case. Or And so that story, and every case tells a story, needs to be out there first and foremost, and then those themes need to be woven through your entire case and woven back into your closing argument.
Absolutely accessible, make it accessible. Whatever it is, if it's a patent, a software patent, I think it's impossible to make those accessible. But whatever it is, make it accessible, keep it short. The evidence will show, the evidence is kind of come out. What we see now in opening statements, certainly in closing arguments, but in opening statements now are slides. A lot of people use slides. And, you know, it's time for the jury to get a nice nap. Slides, you know, slides are kind of a substitute for eloquence, I think, sometimes. And my sense is good lawyers can articulate a story and tell the story, as Judge Freeman said. It's all about the story. It's all about the story. And you cannot put your emotion through a slide. It doesn't work that way. That is truly intelligence that is artificial. What you want to see is, I think, the jurors there that you've had a chance to talk with on voir dire, that you've seen the judge interact with, they want to hear the story because we have told them that in voir dire. These lawyers will make it accessible. We're blessed with good lawyers here on both sides. They're going to help you understand it. So don't blow that opportunity.
Yeah, agreement with all that. A story for humans. I mean, lawyers spend all their time talking to other lawyers and to judges, and so often an ineffective opening statement is technical and it's got legal jargon, and it's the kind of talk that the lawyers give to other lawyers. And the much more effective one is a story that's supported by images and video and the best evidence to support the story and is credible. If it's exaggerated and outside of the experience of the jurors, then they're just not going to believe from the get-go, and you're probably going to lose. But if it's a coherent narrative that is told in human terms, then you're going to get off to a good start.
Yeah, the best advice I got as a litigator was to try out your opening statement on someone who's not a member of your team. And preferably not a lawyer, but at least not a member of your team, because by the time you get to trial, you and your team are so wedded to your positions, as you should be, that you really have no objectivity. And you really need to try it out on somebody who's not that committed, and get their feedback. And those, I think, are the most effective opening statements, because they bring a candor and an ability to communicate, like we've all been talking about, that if you just keep saying what what you want to hear, and you saying it to people who want to hear what you have to say, you get a very different perspective.
Well, Judge Davila talked about some of the ways in which slides might undermine your presentation, but let's talk about the flip side. What are some effective uses of slides and technology in the courtroom that you've seen in trial?
Well, I think that the technology is good, and I think it should be used in moderation, because people have different learning styles. And for some people, listening may not be their best way of learning, but seeing it may help them. And so as long as you're not standing there reading your PowerPoint, which some people do, I think it can be very helpful. You know, I see a few people who might have been practicing law as long as I have here, and Judge Davila and I share this. In the old days, we had butcher paper and we wrote things. And people watch you when you create something. I don't know whether anyone was here who's here from our U.S. Attorney's Office was ever a state prosecutor, but how many DUI cases did I see them draw the street and place the car? I mean, it was, and you know, you're watching every bit of it, or draw the room, and this is where this is where the gun was found, and this is where the bed was, and this is the trail of blood. They're watching you, and they're rapt, and it's being created in front of them. Sometimes those old school things can be very effective. or we get experts in patent cases who go through the elements and the slide is there with the element and then magically a green check mark appears. Well, what's wrong with the expert getting up and going over to the visual and checking it off himself and really being engaging? So there are ways of using the visual that I think is much more effective, and it's a way to communicate with jurors who are not as good at just listening, but they need to see something in writing as well.
What I just despise, those little pointers. Those little, I could, that made them colorful. I could never see them. Lawyers, and and the lawyers would come up and, I'll just say this, the LA lawyers would come up with the fanciest, the whatever it is. And half the time it would work. They weren't properly trained, the batteries weren't, but the light would be, where is this? And to Judge Schmidt, the butcher paper, you get out of, here's what it is, you tear it off. Just that noise of paper tearing, that's the jury's attention. If you look at our jury boxes, we don't have a screen in front of each juror. They're spaced out. And part of that is spatial reasons and comfort. But I really think the other part is, as Judge Freeman said, you don't want people we have enough social media. You don't want them frozen here. We want them to pay attention to the litigants, the lawyers, and the judges. And old school is great. Demonstrative, I just think there's no substitute for demonstrative. You have a patent case, whatever it is. We had a couple of patent cases that have certain types of whatever devices. You bring the device and you bring the hi-hat in on a autonomous vehicle kind of case. You pass that around. Jurors love that. We had something with lighting fraction where they made the little, you put the magic trick. You put the steel rod in the liquid and the light refraction is the same. And so it disappears. Oh, that was fantastic. Everybody was on the edge of their seat. And they weaved that into the argument, which was part of the technology. But that is much more than, let me show you screen 58.
Yeah, at the beginning of the trial, jurors are at their peak of paying attention, and so they're desperate to see something real. So if there's like a piece of equipment you can put in front of them and point to, they're going to pay attention to that so much more than a slide. A slide is just like everybody's got 20 slides in their life. So if you can break out of the norm and pass around, something for them to hold in their hands, it's going to be much more impactful and break up the monotony of what will become boring soon if lawyers talk too much. Jeff on a good start.
Yeah, I agree. Just to go a little bit sideways, is I do like slides for oral argument, complex oral arguments. I think they can be very helpful. They certainly can be helpful to me, but not slides that are read from, not slides that cut and paste large chunks of cases. I can read the case fine and read the cases, but if you have talking points, if you have sort of key elements that you want to walk through and guide, and obviously in technology related cases, I find them very helpful. And I always tell the litigants, but bring me a hard copy. It's one thing to look on the screen, but I scribble on the slides when I have them. So I think, again, coming into court and saying, well, I didn't bring any copy. It's like, well, whatever. Bring the hard copies. They can be helpful, can be overdone.
Judge Freeman, in state court, did you ever allow the gun to be passed around amongst the
No, I never did that.
people's number one, the butcher knife?
No, they used to bring photos in of those.
There's some limitations.
There are limits. The drugs don't go in back to the.
Sealed in a bag.
Yeah, right. Let's see if it's pure.
So all of you have had different areas of practice before you became judges. If you could go back in time and influence your career on the other side of the bench, is there anything you wish you had known at that
time? Wow.
It's a long time, hasn't it?
Well, I'll jump in while they're thinking, which is,
Thank you.
I was at a big law firm for way too long. When I first started as an associate, I was really focused on the fighting. How do you fight these discovery fights and write mean emails? And I really didn't get exposure to the solution part of the profession until 8 years or 9 years in. And that was, okay, finally got to go to a settlement conference and some mediations. And if I could do it all over again, I would have gotten some more training at the front end about how do you solve these problems? How do you settle cases? What makes a case resolved? And what are the steps that you can do at the beginning to get in a position to settle? Because I just really didn't get exposure. We were compartmentalized into the fighting, and I wish I'd gotten more exposure to the settlement process sooner. It was really as an assistant U.S. attorney, and same would be true on the defense side of having smaller cases and having the repetition of negotiation, frequent negotiation, work things out. That for me was a key training tool to say, okay, we've got to find a way to find a solution in this case and work out a plea. And how do we do that? So more settlement and mediation exposure was good for me.
I'm thinking, thanks for the segue, thanks for the note. I'm elected, thank you. But I just think that, and maybe my comment is a little not appropriate, I don't know, but when I started practice as a young public defender, there were a lot of, I'm just going to say this, there were a lot of judge uglies around. And by that, I mean, they were in my wife and I, it's no secret, she and I were in the public defender's office together, PD romance and all of that. But we both share stories about Mary going to court and the judge is saying, Blondie, what case do you have, Blondie? And, you're wearing my favorite color, tight. I mean, there were judge uglies who would say these things back then, and mercifully they're gone now. Every now and then you hear about somebody like that in the elevator. I know a fellow who was appointed to, a friend of mine who was appointed to the bench, told me this story when I think I had just left that court, but he was in the elevator, got in the back elevator, and it was the judges got in and it got crowded. Then in the front, there were two judges. They're both gone now too. And one of them said, what's all this stuff about diversity? If I want diversity, I'll just go to the golf course. That's where the greenskeepers are. And those kind of comments were made. Now, what I wish I could have done back then when I was a young public defender, we endured that kind of stuff. I wish I had had the courage now going back in time to probably stand up to those judges a little more. Of course, I was this young, knees knocking in front of these guys and didn't have the courage to say, pardon me, Judge, that's inappropriate, isn't it? Wish I had that. Would have, should have, could. But that was good training for me. I mean, I learned a lot that kind of gave me some thoughts about how to practice as a lawyer and hopefully be a judge better.
Yeah, I think if I could go back, I would have sought out better mentorship than I've had. So when I was a young lawyer, there weren't very many women, and women really suffered from not being offered mentorship. So it would be hard. I'd rather be doing this now, but I observed a lot of lawyers practicing, but quite frankly, at the time, the practice was take no prisoners. I watched these men just rip people up, whether it was their secretary, their associates, yelling, saying negative things. Those were my role models. And I actually found that I adopted a lot of that in my early years, that I thought you were supposed to win at all costs. I thought you were supposed to just, eyes on the prize and not even consider compromise unless you felt you were losing, but otherwise just go forward. And it took me a long time to realize those are not good role models. And until a number of years into my law practice, I didn't have mentors who actually could show me a better side and a better way to practice law. My 4 years in the private sector did not show me that. My years in the public sector certainly did.
I think for me, I also came up through big law, and I had a lot of good in that experience. I had excellent mentors. I got a lot of good hands-on experience. But I wish I had been exposed to a more robust pro bono program where you're really sitting across the table from an individual with a problem who needs a lawyer to solve it. And it's not complex and there's not a lot of money and it's not, all those kinds of cases. It's just, I really have to understand this and get from point A to point B. And really that problem solver on a very personal level. Because on the bench, we do get that. We see it in settlement conferences. We see it in our very vast pro se litigants. And I hope I've learned in the years I've been on the bench how to help and facilitate and address those cases in a constructive way. But I do wish it had been much more part of my training coming up as a lawyer.
So this will be a fun question. This will be, I think, a segment we call "What Grinds My Gears." So for Family Guy fans out there. So the question is, what is the single most annoying thing a lawyer has done in your court, or that lawyers do on a recurring basis in your court?
You don't need to mention any names.
And this could be anything, an oral argument and briefing, what really bothers?
I had a lawyer slam the notebook shut and get up and walk out of the courtroom. I think I was the most surprised person in the courtroom. I was like, wait, wow. And that person will never be back in my courtroom. So. But I thought that was pretty extreme. Don't do that. That's
Yeah, I'm reluctant to pick on I'm not going to pick on the individual lawyer, but lawyers are humans too, and maybe with some ages comes some wisdom. Lawyers have got mental health issues and substance abuse issues. There's a lot of people in our courtrooms, lawyers and non-lawyers, who've got some challenges going on in their lives. And I guess my grace, which I try to bring to that, is that they might have something going on which we don't appreciate. And so if somebody's doing something unexpected, they might have something unexpected going on in their life that I don't appreciate from where I'm sitting. So unless I really know what's going on, maybe look the other way a little bit about, are they doing that because of me? Is it about me? Usually the answer is no. They're not aiming at me. They've got something else that's aggrieving them. And to try to understand what that is before I react that it's offensive to me or to my courthouse or courtroom. That's my next.
Yeah, that's really good thought. Yeah. It's, what I appreciate, we all appreciate civility in our courts and in the practice and the litigant. I just really detest interrupt. When one lawyer will interrupt the other lawyer or interrupt court, well, just a minute, Your Honor, I have something more important to say. What really bothers me, and pardon me, but what really bothers me is when there's a male attorney and a woman attorney, colleague opposite, and the male attorney will refer to his colleague opposite as her, or what she said, or use those terms that are just disturbing to me. They'll say that. I will. Are you referring to Ms. Smith when you say she? When you say her, is that what are you talking about, sir? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, of course. That really bothers me for several reasons. It's not just because of what they're saying, just the fact that there's this whole demeaning part of it. But I'm just surprised that still exists. They're still, maybe they're not judge uglies, but they're lawyer uglies who are still engaged in that type of that bothers me. It really does.
So I think what bothers me is in my view, it's a part of the COVID hangover, and that is the lack of courtroom decorum. I have a lot of motions. Lawyers come in, they sit at these tables. It's their turn to address the court, and they stay seated. And I always say to them, it's not about me. This is a courtroom, and you need to stand up, and you need to come forward to the podium. We also need you to use the microphone, because half the time our court reporter is remote. They're in Idaho or something, and they can only hear through the microphone. But this lack of decorum, I think, I think it spills over into the lack of civility as well. And we didn't have this before COVID. People knew they were supposed to stand up to address the court and then sit down. But that seems to have, every week I have to remind people to stand up and come forward and address the court as opposed to just sitting. I mean, during COVID, we all had the funny stories of people not dressing properly. So when they come into the courtroom, they certainly do. But so when people come into the courtroom, they're dressed properly, but on Zoom, somehow they didn't think they needed to. I think we've addressed that.
So I'm going to ask the opposite question, which is, what is something that a lawyer has done in your court, whether it's in the courtroom or in a brief or something else that you saw that you found genuinely helpful that you would love to see more lawyers doing? If lawyers ever.
Yeah, concede a point. And we talked about this last week as well, but have the courage to concede. And the lawyer stand up and recognizes her weakness in a particular point. There are the laws disfavors this, but I would like you to seriously consider X or whatever it might. Boy, doesn't that give credibility? To say, right, it's maybe not going my way to Ed Shannon, but let me try to. That is just so. That to me tells me, okay, this lawyer's got courage. She's not afraid. Recognizes strengths, weaknesses, and she's prepared her case to buttress against that. And I'm eager to hear that. Good lawyering, this states the obvious. Good lawyering, good arguments, civility, smart, prepared. That's Mozart to our ears. And we will go to that concert every day. Bring it to us.
I'm heartened when at trial, the lawyers are actually working together to put the technology on, they're sharing a computer and there's plenty of things to fight about on the merits, but when they're cooperating to help prepare the case, that's to me a good sign that whatever the result is going to be, that there's justice being done. Just putting on the trial are going to help us get the right result. So that's not uncommon, but it's nice to see cooperation occurring.
Yeah, the same. And at a hearing, you come out and the lawyers say, well, we just spent a few minutes in the hallway and we talked about X, Y, Z. And again, just that level of cooperation. Maybe they've resolved something. Maybe they've just moved the ball a little further down the field. Okay, we're here at court and we're ultimately all moving in the same direction. We have different objectives, but moving the case forward, to your earlier point, Judge Cousins. And here's a way to do that. When lawyers come in with a proposal, a constructive proposal, and they work together, that's the best. Not bad.
Well, since it's come up a few times, I wanted to ask about remote or Zoom hearings and your thoughts on those, because I sense there's some differing opinions on this panel on those. So what are your thoughts on whether those are helpful for you or if they're encouraged or discouraged?
I have a hybrid approach. So my status conferences, things that are, pretty pro forma, I do those by Zoom. I think that's a very efficient way to do it. And lawyers don't have to travel to come talk to me about the case schedule. But my substantive motions, I like to have the lawyers come in the courtroom. And I like that interaction. I like, the demonstratives being passed around. I like that time with the lawyers and to really work through the issues. And there's an in-person piece of that I think benefits the case and the clients. But, if there's good cause to do it remotely, we'll see.
Thanks all of you for being here in person.
Yeah.
If you were on Zoom, you probably would have changed the channel by now. Here you're under our close supervision, so we can see that you're what you're up to. But there's real pros and cons, and I too have hybrid and have some of each. And when I think about the burdens of TSA and having to fly here from, if you're on the East Coast to fly here for a hearing and the time and expense involved, I'm sympathetic to why the client and the attorney might say, can we please do this 30-minute hearing without going through that process? At the same time, when we have a settlement conference, and just it's more effective to all be here in the same room to talk, see each other, talk to each other, understand the other parties better face to face. I find it still be more efficacious than doing it over a computer screen. So I understand it's more frequently the parties that want to be remote and I more frequently want to be in person, but we're still working our way through the balancing of the pros and cons.
Yeah, my default is I like lawyers and I like to use our courtroom. And so I like to have the lawyers in the courtroom. However, Judge Cousins says for a CMC 20-minute something, I'm not going to have a lawyer fly out from Philadelphia from New York. You can do that remote, and you can make a request, of course, to peer remote. I get those with some unfortunate frequency. I'm in San Mateo, Judge. 280 is one of the most lovely frequencies in the nation, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. But, I like to see the lawyers there. And then I sometimes think that the Zoom through COVID is partly responsible for that lack of understanding about what you're supposed to do once you get here. The standing
I
up,
don't think so.
all of that. Lawyers have maybe lost that connection when they come in, and we all have stories about lawyers appearing on Zoom with, I'm an old fogey, and I said, you gotta have a tie on, you gotta have a jacket, this is court, I beg your pardon. And, not sit back in the chair, one fella had his shoe up. I started the hearing saying, Mr. Smith has asked us all to look at his shoe and tell him whether or not it needs repairing. Let's deal with that issue first. I'm sorry, of course you do, but you're more than that. But I like lawyers in the court, but of course we're not going to San Mateo.
I have as much in the courtroom as I can. If it's going to be a 20-minute case management conference, I don't require that. But I do find in some of the really complex cases that at least for the first case management conference, the lawyers need to be in the room together, more for them to talk to each other than for me. And so in some of the bigger cases, either they ask for it or I ask them to do it. And then we decide whether or not that's productive in the future. But I think that helps with the civility if they've met each other, shaken each other's hands, and stood next to each other, as opposed to being on Zoom. When lawyers ask to have their substantive hearings on Zoom, if it's a medical issue, I grant it, of course. But even with the medical issue, I'm going to look at the case and decide whether I can just take it off calendar, because the Zoom hearing's not very helpful to me. And so, if it's not helpful to me, they wrote their brief. I read everything that they said. And so I'll quite often just take those off. But I'm certainly going to grant the request so that no one has to travel when they have a medical issue. And that comes up with some frequency. I mean, all kinds of things. But the ones that I deny, sometimes we get frequent filers in some of the smaller cases, and it'll be an LA firm. They took the case knowing it was and filed it here. And my feeling is that's part of your bargain with your client. You need to be here. And I'm not very concerned about the fact they want to defend the motion to dismiss on Zoom. They just have to be here.
Okay, so we have some time left for questions. If anyone in the audience has, okay. Yeah.
I'm almost there.
Well, good listen.
What is an effective approach for an attorney to approach settlement conferences? A lot of people like to come in and say, Your Honor, this case is worth $1 million and not a penny less. And the other side comes in with, a completely different perspective. What do you think is a good approach to that process?
Well, I think there's a lot of different approaches. So good question. Thank you for starting us off. The beauty of a settlement conference is it's a team communication. So you've got your client, what's your client expect? What does the opposing party anticipate from the process, and their counsel and the judge? Different judges have different approach to settlement conferences or mediation. Is it going to be an evaluative conversation, facilitated, all in the same room, different rooms? So very different experiences from those different things. And the cases can settle using any of those approaches. So I think you might experiment and see what works for you. And and try to anticipate for your settlement judge, what are their expectations, how do they do things, and to find your way forward. But being prepared is the important starting point of what your objectives are for the process, and sharing information in advance with your client and with the other side about what's going into it. That makes the likelihood of success much higher if you're prepared and communicated before the conference, and you get there kind of ready to then negotiate and get to a deal. So that's a long-winded answer, but I hope it's responsive.
I think most of us, I know my standing order, I have the parties, they submit a joint statement, and that's just very pro forma. And then they also have the opportunity to submit confidential statements. And those can be very, very helpful. And again, it's just like everything else we talked about, being candid, getting to the point, and having a very honest evaluation, because nobody sees those except me. They're not filed. We guard our confidentiality obligations in the settlement process very robustly in this courthouse. I don't talk about cases I have for settlement with the presiding judge in any substantive way, about personalities or the issues, and that allows us to have very candid discussions. And that's really what the confidential statement is for. That's where you can say, look, our liability claim is weak, we think, or, it's not as strong as we'd like, but our damages are, wow, so, and that kind of helps to calibrate. And I know that's what I look for. And then I always talk to the lawyers a couple of days before the conference. We do it both jointly and individually, to really kind of try to set the stage and manage expectations. And see if we
I'll
can.
add one other thing. I think it's really important that you prepare your client honestly about what to expect. So I know there's this disconnect. In order to get the case, you had to promise them that their position was the only one that would prevail, and it's a slam dunk. And ultimately, you realize it wasn't quite that good. So there has to be a time, and it shouldn't be when the verdict is read, that the client understands the strengths and weaknesses. Because otherwise, all you can do is come in and ask for the moon or offer a nuisance value, because you promised that to your client. And then the settlement conference is a waste of time, because it's not the time for you to be moving your client from those extremes. Clearly, the judge's role is to be a reality check for your client as well, but it can't start there.
Only one more thing, which is just to expand. Parties are frequently thinking about the other side and beating them in litigation, like how we're going to prevail on our arguments. But in a settlement conference, it's oftentimes about information. So part of the preparation is, does the other side have the information that they need to compromise? Because if you're relying upon the neutral to persuade the other side to beat them down, it's probably not going to happen. You have to give the other side the information they need to allow them to change their position, and to have enough information to really make an informed decision. And sometimes I have some bad experiences where parties are negotiating kind of for power, and they're not giving up something and expecting to get something in return. It doesn't usually work.
Any other questions?
I wonder if you have thoughts on experimenting with non-traditional procedures, whether that's, phase an issue early and we're going to do discovery just on this and try to get to summary judgment on it, or certainly in patent cases, people talk about hot tubbing experts or having test claims. May have other thoughts. Are you open to it? Are you interested in it? Are there things you're thinking about right now?
Well, I am. I'm always interested in looking at when the lawyers bring that to me, and there's, they've obviously met and conferred and said this might be a path to either resolution or at least speeding up the briefing. Maybe we can avoid an MSJ if we, find this issue, those kinds. I'm always happy to hear that. I appreciate good lawyering. That's part of good lawyering, strategically planning your case. And I'll ask questions about it and see, is this real? Is this really a path forward? Or is there something else going on? My sense is that if both parties have met and conferred on it, they really are honest about going forward and it will bring an earlier solution. So I'm not adverse to that and welcome.
I think I'm really reticent to go down that road because I have not found in cases that the lawyers really understand the effect of those early and frequent briefings. And so I get an early summary judgment that I'm told will dispose of the case, and then it doesn't. And then where are we? You've jumped the line from all the other litigants, and it hasn't paid off. So I find that to be a problem. I find that parceling out the case and ordering the discovery for efficiency should be done between the lawyers. And I don't think that it benefits a case for the judge to draw a bright line that can just create more bickering. But I think the lawyers should have some agreement on what they need to do to get the case to the next step. And then whether that's class certification, it's getting these days to be kind of the whole case. So it's hard to draw lines. But you as lawyers can do that. I am not a fan of multiple summary judgment motions. And so that's often what litigators are suggesting. Let us peel off this issue for early summary judgment. Then we'll have intermediate summary judgment. Then we'll have the real summary judgment. And I'm saying, no, you're one and done. So why don't you decide what you want? So I haven't found that it pays off in the life of the case.
Right. You get one summary judgment. That's what you get. And you get what you get. And the other thing is when I do allow that, you overarching is you proceed at your own peril.
Yeah.
You said this one thing, I have hopefully a good memory, and I'm gonna at least have written it down and remind you of it when you come back. And okay, you said this, and now we're here. I think I'm done. So, may I ask a question, Alan?
Yeah.
I'm just curious. Can you tell us? Help us as judges. Can you tell what have you seen that you like? What can we do to make your jobs better? And it's not rule and grant my motion. We know that. But what or have you seen in other courthouses that you've been in across the country that you think these judges do this well? I like this. I like the way the judge starts her law motion calendar with this or whatever it is. Anything that you could suggest? Otherwise, I take it that we're just perfect.
I'll just say one, which is that I personally really appreciate guidance from the bench along the way. And so I certainly don't expect a tentative on every order, and courts have different practices about that. But even if it is just the court sets some guidance before oral argument, here's what I'm thinking, or these are the issues I'm very interested in. Take your guidance, try to listen. Give me something to listen to so I can see where you are and say, if I've got any shot of persuading you, I think this is what I have to really focus on. Otherwise, let's not waste time. So,
thank you. What about from probation? What can we do? What can we do for probation that be helpful?
Kindness from the judges, especially in probation. You come at us with all types of questions we might not always be expecting. We love it when you contact us beforehand. If we can meet with you beforehand, if we can have a phone call beforehand, so we know what you're thinking or where, same as you mentioned to the lawyers, so we know what we should focus on or what kind of research we need to do before sentencing. But letting us know what parts of the report were super helpful so we know what to focus on in the next one. That's always great.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I just have a comment. I just wanted to say that thank you. You honors have been very kind and respectful to us. I know sometimes cases are tough and it gets emotional, but even, I'm not sure if you're upset or, we're all humans. But you, every time you have been kind and respectful to us, so thank you.
Is it possible that the lights could stay on the second floor past 6 p.m.?
Very concrete.
With the light thing, we've had judges ask for that too. It's a GSA thing. And you know what? It's a real thing. You have to bring in lamps if you want to work. No,
It is the GSA. We've had this fight with them about, well, if you want extended lights, the court has to pay a little more and this and that. Yeah, and then in the summertime, the AC goes off, right?
I would.
Yeah. It's all. Come on.
This may be an odd one, but as a client, I was in a case where my attorney, I think I can say this simply, in the case that we had settled the case, and the judge wanted to dismiss, and he was real urgent about it because I found out 2 weeks later he was off the bench, and he knew, so he was trying to close out his cases. But my attorney argued with the judge about whether I could be paid before, or had to be paid before the case could be dismissed. And for 35 years, I've never seen, this. And as a client, I'm listening to this argument, not excited about it, but had the judge made it more clear and said something to the effect about, I'll make sure it happens, or, I'm leaving, perhaps even to say I'm leaving this bench, but somebody else will enforce it for it. So it comes across to me because when God forbid an attorney ever wrong, but you understand what I'm saying? Really helps the client who's got to go fight or not fight afterward. Mr. Galloway.
One thing that I think judges could do, and actually judges here do it, but Judge Fogel was famous for this and great at it. If you had something that was going to take 2 minutes or 3 minutes, you were out of his courtroom 15 minutes after the scheduled time. Like, he triaged his calendar super well so that the stuff that was quick, everybody got out of there. And if it was 10 minutes to the hour and you're still sitting there, it's because you have something more substantive. It's going to take time.
Thanks, Dave. We try to do that in advance. We'll look at and see on the criminal calendar. I'll look and see. We're always going to call the in custodies first, and deference to the marshals and transportation. I think, but I think I try to look at the calendar and see assess as best I can what's this going to be and those types of things. And our civil calendar, I think we try to do the same thing. We look at it as best we can. Sometimes we're fooled, or sometimes we, choose poorly. But yeah, thanks. Thank you. Because you've got places to be. You're a big shot lawyer.
All right, well, I think that's all the time we have. So I wanted to thank our distinguished panel of judges for their. So everyone, we have a reception in the attorney lounge on the first floor, and please eat that food because I have nothing, I can't do anything with it.